Good afternoon. I'm Joe Stevens, Director of MBA Programs in the Trulaske College of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our Vaughan Executive-in-Residence lecture. Before we begin, I'd like to ask the following. It's in bright red print on my script, so I know it's important. Please turn off your cell phones. They do disturb some of the audio that we have in here if you have those on, so please do turn those off. And please stay until the completion of the program. It does include a significant Q&A segment because our guest today has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to impart on you, so hopefully you'll take advantage of that. I encourage you to ask follow-up questions, any questions that you have as time permits. We'll also have runners on both sides to take your questions with microphones. One of the strategic priorities of the Trulaske College of Business is collaboration between industry experts and our students, which helps better equip you for success when you graduate. Our business partners serve a very important role in your preparation and readiness for the real world. Speakers provide knowledge about trends, issues, and practices, how to turn challenges into opportunities, sound advice and words of wisdom, and sometimes examples we can all follow as we move forward through our respective careers. Today's lecture is made possible by an endowment from the Vaughan family and a gift from our MBA Advisory Board member emeritus, Ron Fraser, on behalf of Course Modo, a learning platform that helps educators increase engagement through real-time response tools. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to Carol Roth. Carol likes to joke that she is a recovering investment banker, but one of her most notable achievements is her New York Times best-selling book, The Entrepreneur Equation, which she will gladly sign for you following today's presentation if you'd like to purchase a copy and have that signed. In this book, she helps budding entrepreneurs, very much like yourself, some of you, lay the groundwork for their startup endeavors. Rather than asking readers if they're beginning to begin, she asks a series of probing questions that must be answered to ensure success. Questions like, have you laid the groundwork to maximize your skills, cover the things you're not strong at, and maximize your chances to actually make it work? Carol prides herself in asking the hard questions and presenting the hard truths about entrepreneurship. It may be difficult to get a business off the ground, so she helps readers assess whether they are fit for entrepreneurship, much like our own Entrepreneurship Alliance does here at the Trulaske College of Business. Over the years, she has helped her clients ranging from solopreneurs to multinational corporations raise more than $1 billion in capital, complete more than $750 million worth of M&A transactions, secure high-profile licensing and partnership deals, and create million-dollar brand loyalty programs. So it appears her formula does work. Additionally, Carol is a frequent radio, television, and print media contributor on the topics of business and current events, appearing regularly on Fox Business, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and more. She hosts a blog at carolroth.com and was recently named as one of the top 10 small business blogs online, and she was named a top 100 2011 small business influencer. Carol is also a contributing blogger to outlets like the New York Times, the Huffington Post, and Crain's Chicago Business Enterprise City. And here's a fun fact. She's the only business strategist with a fashion doll/action figure in her own likeness. Carol holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, where she graduated magna cum laude. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Carol Roth.
Thank you so much, Joe. Hi, everybody. How are you doing this afternoon? Are you all properly caffeinated? Seriously? Because this is going to go kind of crazy. Thank you first very much to both Joe and Dale and all of you for hosting me here. I absolutely love coming out and talking to folks like yourself and have had a spectacular day. And I recognize some faces from earlier classes, so there may be a few things, including my introductory story that you've heard before, but there's a lot of new material as well. For those of you who haven't heard me before, I'll give you the same warning. I do have incredible ADD. So we may, if I kind of go in one direction and think of something else, we may end up somewhere entirely different, but I will always try and bring it back home. And I always say that I know all of this information already, so I am here for every one of you. So if we're definitely going to have Q&A at the end, but if you're inspired, if there's something that like provokes something in you and you want to like have an immediate conversation, I'm totally cool with that. So if you're entrepreneurial and you get the urge, just feel free to like stand up and jump up and do whatever. I just ask that you don't throw things at me. So let me tell you a little bit about my background and how I got here, because there's a lot of information in the bio, and I think it sets a little bit of the stage. And some of you have heard this before, but I am the white sheep in a family of black sheep. My mom was Martha Stewart, crossed with Cher. She's a woman who would literally freehand pancakes in the shape of animals and clean the house every day, wearing a leopard print bustier and 4-inch stiletto heels and purple contact lenses. My dad is half mobster and half Jewish grandmother and a union electrician. And my sister is the lead singer of a heavy metal band. So just keep it in context that I'm the normal one in my family. I also was bit with the entrepreneurial bug at a very early age. I started my first business when I was 8 years old. It was a business that came to be under the guise of a game called Store. And the way that Store would work is I would go into my sister's room and I would gather up all of her stuffed animals and toys. And then I would trot them back over to my room and I would arrange them in a fun and friendly retail environment. And then I would invite my little sister, who was 4 years younger than me and just absolutely wanted to spend all of her time with me. I didn't really like her that much, but I invited her to come and use her allowance money to buy back her stuffed animals from me. It's a good, I don't know why you're laughing, it's a really good business model. This was something where I knew, first of all, I had a captive customer who wanted every single thing in the store because it was hers to begin with, so guaranteed she wanted it all. And I had no cost of goods sold because I took it from her. And I didn't have to pay any rent because it was in my parents' house. So I was going to spread this all over the neighborhood, but then my mom found out and shut it down before I could do so. But it got me into entrepreneurship at a very early age. And I ended up having that entrepreneurial spirit throughout high school. I was always the kid who was selling something and managed to find my way, even though neither of my parents went to college, found my way into Wharton undergrad. And as I shared with some of the folks earlier, couldn't really afford Wharton, so took on lots of college debts and worked my way through school, including running a football pool, which was very lucrative. And still graduated about 17 years ago with $40,000 in college debt, which nowadays seems fairly reasonable, but back then, sort of today's equivalent of like $120,000 or $160,000. So had to figure out how I was going to pay this down. And as I always say, consultants like to go deep into something. Investment bankers have ADD, so obviously I went into investment banking and started my career there advising other businesses and learning about business from sort of the top down. But after the investment bank that I worked for ended up being acquired, I found myself as an entrepreneur. And so that's given me a really strange and interesting mix, a depth and breadth of experience where I have gone deep into businesses, but also gone wide. I have been an entrepreneur, and I have touched through advisory and all of my travels around well over 1,000 businesses over the course of my career, in addition to raising the capital and whatnot. So I have a really good subset on which to draw from. And then today, and let's see, make sure I'm on here. There we go. And so today, I've actually transitioned my own business, even though I continue to have a consulting business, but I've really focused on being out there as a media brand, focusing on bringing the same kind of advice that I've been giving to companies one-on-one to a broader platform. And as noted, every week I'm on MSNBC or CNN or CNBC or Fox Business and whatnot. but want to talk a little bit about the concepts from my book up there, The Entrepreneur Equation, and what had me write this book, and some of the dirty little secrets about entrepreneurship, because all the other stuff is out there, but want to let you guys into the secrets. So I never intended to write a book, actually. This was something where, as people were coming to me for advisory, I was seeing the same kind of mistakes over and over again. I was seeing the way that people glamorized entrepreneurship, the way that every other person would cite things like Facebook and Google, glamorous, and that people were getting really, really bad advice about business. And I kept saying to myself, how is this? And when I looked out there, I noticed that people were really getting the 7 steps to success. If you follow these 7 steps, you will be successful. How many of you think that there are 7 steps to success? Okay, obviously a very smart group of people here. But people are selling that all over the place, and nobody is telling the truth about what it means to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is fantastic, but you have to go in with the right mindset and really understanding what it's all about in order to be successful. I feel like if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So the more that we can do, the more information you can get before you take the leap, the better. All right, so let's jump in with some of the first secrets. The first one is that ideas sometimes don't look so good the next morning. Now, people go into business for all sorts of reasons, but a lot of the reasons why people go into business is, well, they fall in love with an idea. They're really passionate about something. Or maybe it's not really that they fall in love with an idea, but they fall in lust with the idea. And anytime you fall in lust with anything, you are asking for trouble. I don't care if it's steak or a bad boy or a bad girl. If you're lusting after something, you may end up making some really bad choices. In fact, I shared earlier that there are 3 things that people tend to be emotional about and not rational. One is love, one is money, and the other is business. So if you go into business doing what I call business beer goggling about an idea, you may find something that looked really good, and you get into it, and then you wake up the next day, or maybe it's a couple months down the road, and you go, boy, this isn't really what I thought it looked like. This doesn't look as good as I thought. So it's really important to not get so connected to your ideas up front. Now, the reality is that business is all about the blocking and tackling. It's not necessarily just the sexiness of coming up with the idea. It's what you do after that, day in and day out. And a lot of people don't realize that. We hear about Facebook and we hear about Google in the news constantly because they're exceptions to the rule. If they were the ordinary thing, you wouldn't hear them. They wouldn't be newsworthy. But we don't hear about the usual businesses. We don't hear about the fact that on average, every business in this country is worth about $100,000. Not innovative, no plans to grow, that 60% of businesses don't make a profit over their lifetime, that you're more likely to become a millionaire with a widget business than with an app business. Nobody talks about that because that's not newsworthy and that's not sexy. So those are some of the secrets that we need to dispel. Now, I also want to talk about the whole concept of passion versus opportunity. Because if you come in with that idea, with that passionate idea, you can tend to get led astray. I always say, if you want to be successful in your business, find an opportunity that you can become passionate about instead of trying to come up with a business from your greatest passion. Couple of examples here. First of all, how many of you know the company Zappos.com? You guys know how many of you shop there? Yeah, it's pretty good, right? So Zappos.com was led by Tony Hsieh. Not sure if you know the story. And Tony Hsieh is fantastic, a fantastic entrepreneur, built up this business, sold it to Amazon.com. Now, how many of you think that Tony was really, really passionate about shoes? How many of you think that you could walk into Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, Saks Fifth Avenue, find a whole bunch of women in the shoe department that are more passionate about shoes than Tony Hsieh? Right, because that's not where Tony started the business. He saw an opportunity. The things that he's passionate about are things like customer service in building a community. But you never hear anybody saying, oh, I want to be a fireman or a ballerina or a community builder. Of course not. Silly. So the really strong businesses don't directly come out of the passion. It's finding the passion from the opportunity in the market and building up around it. The other thing is that I have to tell you, for those of you that do have this passion that you love, that there's something to be said for having a hobby that you're not dependent upon to earn an income from. It's good to have these hobbies. If you try and start a business for the thing that you love, you turn this wonderful hobby, this wonderful outlet, into a professional relationship. And that can change your relationship with the business very, very quickly. So be very, very careful when you're in the ideas, when you're thinking about passion and opportunity. Let the opportunity lead. You have to have that passion, but it doesn't need to be the starting point. Now, staying on the topic of ideas, I'm going to tell you that every single day, execution will trump a good idea. An idea is something that you come up with one time and requires very little risk. Maybe you're lying in bed, maybe you're in the shower to come up with this idea, but that's kind of it. You do it once, you come up with the idea. Then the hard part starts. Then you have to write the business plan. Then you have to figure out the business model. Then when you get going, you have to build your store, train your employees, figure out marketing strategies, do things over and over and over and over again. It's kind of like, how many of you know people who have gotten married recently? You have friends that have gone through the wedding process? So funny to me. People always spend all this time on the wedding. They know exactly the flowers, the band, everything, the linens they're going to pick out. And not very many people spend time thinking about how they're going to work on the marriage afterwards, which might be why we have the divorce rate that we have in this country. The whole thing is that marriage is not about the wedding, and the business is not about the idea. It's about all the things that end up coming after it. That is what makes your business successful over and over again. And I hate to tell people this, but your ideas have no value. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense to spend your time focused on the ideas. In fact, there are all kinds of really stupid ideas that have been phenomenally successful. If you think back 20 years, imagine somebody saying, I'm going to sell water. I mean, now it's everywhere, but literally, I'm going to take the world's most abundant resource and make people pay for it. You can get it, out of a drinking fountain, you can get it anywhere, a hose. I want people to pay. And then I'm going to charge a premium by putting vitamins in it and calling it smart. I mean, that does not seem like a really good business idea. But the execution of it was fantastic, right? It's all about convenience. It's all about lifestyle. It's not about the base idea. It's about the execution. What about even Starbucks? Again, 20 years ago when Starbucks was getting on a roll, I'm going to sell coffee for like 3 times the amount that everybody else pays for coffee that you can already get at McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, 7-Eleven, the White Hen Pantry, at home through Hills Brothers. I'm going to open up a coffee shop on every corner and charge 3 times as much. Does that seem like a good business idea? No. But was it incredibly successful? Yes, because the execution transformed that idea into a lifestyle brand. And now, how many of you drink Starbucks? Yeah. So you can have another great stupid idea, the Snuggie. right? So this isn't even novel. This is just somebody who took a bathrobe and put it on backwards, right? And this thing sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth because they had a catchy commercial and people decided that they wanted to wear them to bar crawls. So you can have really, really stupid ideas that end up being successful. You can also have really great ideas that aren't successful because of poor execution or because they came out at the wrong time. When I was in investment banking, we had this great service in San Francisco called Cosmo.com. And what Cosmo.com did was that they would, anytime you wanted to get a snack or something delivered, pint of ice cream, that point in time you could get movies delivered, that you call them up or put your order in online, and they'd come on a little scooter and deliver that to you. And I love this because I was stuck at my desk at this investment banking firm, and I would order Ben & Jerry's, a pint of Ben & Jerry's every single night. So I thought Cosmo was brilliant. Well, the problem was that their business model was no minimum order, so no problem. I could order my Ben & Jerry's. But then they realized that people were just ordering $3 of pints of ice cream, and that didn't really fly for their business. So they ended up putting a minimum quantity on it. You had to order, I think it was like $10 worth of stuff or whatnot. And once they did that, people weren't really interested in it anymore. So it was a great idea, but they couldn't execute it. The best way, though, that I can illustrate that your idea has no value is by the same company that has totally different values under different scenarios. How many of you are mixed martial arts fans, like the UFC? You guys ever watch the UFC? I like the UFC. Are you guys at least familiar with it? All right. So the UFC, about 5-10 years ago, was on the brink of bankruptcy. The people who started it couldn't quite make it work. It was more of a blood sport, actually, back then, a little bit gorier. And this company was going nowhere fast and was worth almost nothing. Then this group of brothers, the Fertitta brothers and Dana White, who's now president of the UFC, decided that they were going to buy this league and they were going to transform it. And a couple of years ago, Forbes valued the UFC at over $1 billion. So if you have the same company that is worth nothing and then worth $1 billion a little bit later, how much is the idea for a mixed martial arts league worth? Nothing. It's the people who execute. It was the execution of the business model. So again, I feel like entrepreneurs who get so caught up in just the idea end up missing the secret that it's not the idea, it's what you do with it. And that's a really, really important takeaway for you guys. All right, so next up, not all businesses are created equal. I told you a little bit about my crazy mom, the Martha Stewart crossed with Cher. Given the fact that she was creative, she founded, back in the early 1980s, one of the very first gift basket companies. Now, right now, gift baskets don't seem that innovative, but back in 1980, nobody was really doing them. And her partner were going crazy with the gift baskets. In fact, our basement looked sort of like Party City, but a tornado had ripped through it with like balloons and cellophane everywhere. And my mom and her partner had a strength of putting together these amazing gift baskets. But they also had a weakness that they put together these amazing gift baskets and couldn't teach anybody else how to do it. So after 10 years of putting together these amazing gift baskets and moving from the basement into a storefront and working, I think they were working like, 40 to 50 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, they figured out how much they were making, and they were making somewhere in the range of, wait for it, $4 an hour. Amazing. Yeah, that's where I got my business savvy from. But the problem is that not all businesses are created equal. And I've come up with sort of 3 different kinds of businesses and 3 different categories to put them in. And this is really the intersection, if you're going to go into business, if you're going to start a business, of how you evaluate what kind of business is right for you and the risks and rewards associated with each. So I like to make a board. So the first one I call a jobby, which is a hobby disguised as a job or a business. It's basically a little side business that you make money from. And I love the concept of a jobby because it's a really good way for you to test out a business on the side. Something that you can do nights and weekends, while you're at school, a great way to see if there's a market opportunity for something before you take it to the next level. The problem is that some people start with the jobby, and that's really all that it can become, but they think it's going to be more. So they go out and they spend tons of money buying flour and sugar and brochures for their cupcake business that really is never going to be more than a hobby for them. So you have to be careful. It's a great way to make some side money. It's a great way to test something out, but it may not be the catalyst to get you where you need to go. The next level, this is the important one because this is where most of the businesses in our country are today, what I call a job business. And this is a business that is dependent entirely on one or maybe two people to exist. And if those people go away, they get hit by a bus, there is no business. If they go on vacation, the business doesn't make any money. And my mom clearly had this job business. I also have a really good friend, my friend Terry, who's a massage therapist, which, by the way, really good kind of friend to have. If you're looking for more friends, highly recommend getting one that's a massage therapist. And she is a phenomenal massage therapist. But when Terry goes on vacation, she doesn't make any money. And the reality is that 20 years from now, if she decides to stop being a massage therapist, nobody's going to buy her practice because you know why? We come to get a massage from Terry. So a lot of people, I think it's 22 million of the 28 million small businesses and entrepreneurial businesses in the country today are in these job businesses. And this is, I think, where the biggest potential trap is in the risk and reward. Are you building something that is scalable? Are you building something that is entirely dependent upon you? And if you are, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you just have to know what the limitation is. And if you're trading off, if you're giving up the opportunity to work in a company or to start another business, really take a look to see if a job business is going to get you where you want to go and if it allows you to be as successful as you can be. If not, then you may want to go down to the other end of the scale to a bona fide business. And I will let you in on another little secret that most of the entrepreneurs that make really big bucks, the big paydays in this country, are from entrepreneurs that build bona fide businesses because they're building equity value in the business that's separate from themselves, and they can sell that, they can pass that on to somebody else at some point in the future. So it's really important as you think about it, if you're thinking about building a business and you're crafting your business model, or if you have an existing business that isn't necessarily getting you where you need to go, or you're just re-strategizing, really think about, is this going to be a bona fide business? Is this something that I can build that will, A, eventually, when I get a chance to have a vacation, which, by the way, is a total pipe dream for entrepreneurs for the first couple of years, but eventually you do get to the point where you come up with systems and you can go on vacation and it will still make money for you, and that you build up the systems and it becomes something in and of itself apart from you so that you can sell it at the end of the day. So they're not all the same. If you're thinking about the businesses, I want you to really think about the risks and rewards and the kind of business that you're intended to build. And I will say that, again, this is all dependent upon you and your goals. It all matters, whatever your own definition of success is, because there is no right definition of success. So whatever your own definition is, whatever your circumstances are, your goals and your objectives, that's the lens. And if it works for you, that's great. But make sure it does, in fact, work for you. Next secret about entrepreneurship is that it doesn't solve other problems in your life. Favorite thing about the reasons that people go into business are because of these other problems that they think the business will automatically fix. Like, I can't get anyone to hire me, so I'm going to start a business. Let me tell you, people, if you can't get one or two people to hire you, if you can't sell yourself, who you should know theoretically better than anything else in the entire universe, How are you going to get dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of customers to buy from you every single day? If you cannot do that woo, the business is not going to be that panacea for you. It is not going to solve that problem. Other thing it is not going to solve for you is the ability to be the boss. Now, I represent the totem pole up there. When you go to work in a corporation, you start at the very bottom of the totem pole. It's not very comfortable. There are a lot of people above you. You're shouldering all of that weight. But hopefully you put in your time and effort, and you're clever and crafty, and you get to start moving up the totem pole. And they add some new people underneath you, and some of them retire and fall off the top, and you get the upward mobility. You get to move up the totem pole. When you start your own business, you never get to move up that totem pole, because at the top of that totem pole, every single time is your customers. Because if you don't have customers, you don't have a business. If people aren't patronizing and paying you, then you don't have a business. So the customers get to be at the top of the totem pole. Then you have things like investors and lenders and landlords who get to tell you what to do. They set the rules about your store. They set the rules about how you need to run your financials and when you need to pay them back. And if you have employees, then you have to pay them first, and you're always at the bottom of the totem pole. So the illusion that all of a sudden you get to be your own boss when you start a business, that will not fix that one for you either. There's also a few other things that it won't solve for you. This is one of my favorite ones, is that I don't like to work with people. Some people, I start a business because I don't like to work with people. Well, unless cats, dogs, and trees start stepping up and paying for things and becoming vendors and suppliers and employees, I'm pretty sure that if you start a business, you are still going to have to work with people in some capacity. And again, your customers end up being the conduit, end up being the most important thing, so you don't get to escape that just by starting a business. So I think it's good to have that realistic perspective, because all of these things that set people into business set them up to not be happy in their businesses. All right, speaking of customers, there is no Field of Dreams. Now, you guys may be too young. Has anybody seen the movie Field of Dreams or familiar with it? Oh, it's good, good. All right, so if you haven't seen it, Kevin Costner builds this baseball field, and his big statement is, if we build it, they will come. And that used to be the case, right? It used to be that if you built something, people would show up for it. And that doesn't happen anymore. Because the good news is that it's gotten really easy to start a business. Technology's lowered the barrier. That barrier means anyone can be in business in 5 seconds. The bad news is technology has lowered that barrier. Anybody can be in business in 5 seconds. So you have all of this competition to contend with, which also, regardless if it's good competition or bad competition, means that it is harder than ever to reach your customer. Yes, I know it's easier than ever to reach them, but it's harder to get their attention. Everybody wants to be tuned in to their favorite radio station, WIIFM, What's in It for Me? And they're bombarded with so many different messages every single day. Just think about the course of your day, how many messages and advertisements you guys are bombarded with. And now with the internet, they're coming through on our cell phones, they're coming in on social media and whatnot. So even though you may be able to connect with your customer, it's harder to make them pay attention for any large period of time. So that means it's harder for your business to get going. And a lot of entrepreneurs think that they're so excited about the business that when I open it, everyone else is going to be excited about it. And they don't realize that it takes a long, long time for the business to get going and to get its feet underneath it. So really, really think about that. One of the big themes today that we've been talking about that I want to spend some time on in terms of a secret is about failure. Because obviously, you're all here in the business school, you're all really smart, and I'm guessing that probably most of you have not failed at probably anything or not very many things in your life. I know that that was the case through school, because school puts you in a situation where you're not set up to fail. If you fail, it's bad. You have to sit in the back of the room with the dunce cap on, You're striving for the A and the gold star. But the reality is that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to fail. You have to be able to put yourself out there and make sure that you're taking those kinds of risks. So it's not necessarily if you fail, it's about how you fail. And so I say there are 3 ways to look at failure, right? You fail fast, you fail cheap, and you never fail the same way twice. If you spend multiple years building up your dream business and your dream project, and you put everything into something and it doesn't work, that is a devastating blow and a colossal waste of your time. There's an opportunity cost of what else you could have been doing. If you put all your money into something, there is an actual physical cost of capital to what you're doing. So if you put in everything, you bet the farm, and it doesn't work out, that can be really, really painful. So you want to make sure that when you're trying things out entrepreneurially, that you're doing it and you're testing to see if it works in a way that if it doesn't work, you can recover quickly, that you can recover financially. And then, of course, you have to be able to learn from those mistakes. If you don't learn from those mistakes, then you're never going to be able to grow. So it's okay to make the mistakes once, but you don't want to be making the same mistake over and over and over again. As Einstein said, the definition of insanity, doing the same things and expecting that you're going to get different results from them. All right. Important, dirty secret of entrepreneurship is something that I call the rule of 3. And the rule of 3 is that everything takes 3 times as long, is 3 times as expensive, and is 3 times harder than you project it will be. And this is really important for anybody who's building a business plan and financial models, but also just good for your own psyche. I cannot tell you how many times an entrepreneur has come to me with projections, and every single time the projections have been conservative. You guys heard that before? Yes, my projections are conservative, the hockey stick projections. And the reality is that it is really, really hard to project things. And it doesn't matter who's involved, somebody is going to drop the ball along the way. It could be your web developer, it could be your lawyer, but whatever it is, it's going to take 3 times as long. You're not going to get the financials you think, either because you don't come along fast enough or it costs more, and of course, it's going to be more difficult than you ever anticipated. And part of the reason why this is important is because the hardest exercise that you may have to do is exercising your patience. I'm a very impatient person, and if you're an entrepreneurial-minded person, you are probably also a very impatient person, and you are going to get frustrated. So hopefully you can remember the rule of 3. But the other reason why the rule of 3 is so important is to give yourself enough runway. Businesses take, as I said, much longer to get their foundation than you would expect. In fact, I think that nowadays, given all of the competition, given how hard it is to reach people and to get their attention and the sales cycles, whether you've got a B2C or a B2B business, that it can take 2 to 3 years to get your foundation underneath you. And that's why I have this new acronym that I'm using called TGFO, thank God for Oprah. Because Oprah Winfrey went into a new business just about 2 years ago. She started her own network. Oprah has, we'll say, the best network around of friends and fans. She's got more money than you could ever think of. If Oprah is going to take a couple of years to get her business to a point that it has a foundation, then probably take everybody else that too. So finally, I've got somebody that I can point to say, what about Oprah? Everything takes longer than you expect. Next piece I want to talk a little bit about is timing, because timing really is everything in business. And sometimes if you haven't done the preparation, then the time might not be right for you. I talked a little bit about testing things out. I have a woman who wanted to start what she called a healthy fast food franchise. Basically, she wanted to open a Subway. She had a passion for healthy fast food. And she worked at Morgan Stanley. And I told her, I said, well, maybe you want to try out working at a Subway at nights and weekends before you open one. Really? You think I should do that? Yes, I do. And she went and she started working there on the nights and weekends. And you know what happened? About 3 months later, she came back to me and she said, if I never see another $5 footlong again, as long as I live, I will be the happiest person. Because in her mind, she thought that this was fantastic, but until she had the opportunity to test it out, it didn't work for her. So the timing in that sense wasn't right for her. For other people, there are other elements of timing, and for you guys, it's actually funny. The fact, you have to look at all the different risks and rewards in your life. You have to look at the capital, you have to look at who you're responsible for, you have to look at the experience. The fact that you're in college right now could make it an ideal time to test out a business. Because if you think about the risks and rewards, you may have less at stake now than you do when you graduate. I know for me that was the case, that when I graduated, the loans kicked in. But I had some time where I had a captive audience of students in their dorm room who were willing to enter a football pool. That was a very easy time to test out a business. So you have to look at all of the elements in there. If you have children and you are thinking about their futures and funding their futures, it may be hard to start a business at that point in time. If you're looking with your family and they want to spend time with you, and you're going to be distracted by starting a business, that could be a really challenging time. So you have to look at timing in the context of the risks and rewards as well to find out if it's the best possible time for you to start a business. And that's why right now is a really good time if you want to try and test something out to see if it works, where it may not be the day that you leave here. All right, so money doesn't fix a bad business model. Money is one of those funny things that I hear about entrepreneurs. If I just had more money, if I just had a celebrity endorsement, if I just had Nike backing me, my business would be successful. Thank you. The problem is that if you don't know how to deploy the money, if you don't have all the right skills, and if you have a business model that's pretty shaky, all of the money in the world isn't going to fix it. And in fact, money is one of those funny things. The more that you can do without the money, the better off you are. How many of you are familiar, maybe through The Simpsons or through reruns, with the superhero MacGyver? Anybody remember MacGyver? So MacGyver was this really kitschy superhero from the 80s who would take a rubber band and a pencil, and he would be able to come up with jet fuel from it and get off an island. He was kind of like a quirky James Bond type. Anyway, as an entrepreneur, you need to figure out how to be MacGyver and how to take the resources that you have and do the absolute most with it. Even if you're going to raise capital, the more that you can take risk out of the equation, the more milestones that you can complete, the better chance that you have to raise capital. So money is one of those things that's always going to be an issue. If you can find a way to work around it, to beg, to borrow, to barter, not advocating the stealing part, but beg, borrow, and barter, find different ways to get things done. That is what an entrepreneur does. And then if you do that, when you have the model solidified, then the money can come in and be the catalyst for you. Now this is a tough one because not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. And there are a couple of different ways to address that. First, I want to say that I have a little bit of a scientific test just off the bat to see if you're cut out. Call it, are you Santa Claus or are you an elf? Very scientific. So if you think about Christmas, it takes just one Santa Claus to pull off Christmas, but a whole slew of elves. And what does Santa do? Santa has the vision. Santa gives out the instructions. Santa's out there meeting the kids and, kind of the face of the business, if you will. Santa also gets blamed if the presents aren't delivered. And Santa, if Rudolph gets sick, tries to figure out a solution by taking a goat and some antlers and a red nose and trying to make it work, right? Now, the elf, on the other hand, is very different. The elf sits and waits and says, what do you want me to do, Santa? And executes. He stays behind the scenes. Very competent at what he does, but he's not going to pick up the ball and run with it unless Santa says so. And that's the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who isn't meant to be it. If you're like Santa, then you've got the characteristics to be an entrepreneur. But if you're like an elf, if you're somebody who doesn't want to go out on the limb, that wants to stay behind the scenes, that wants to have those explicit instructions and not necessarily have to think outside of the box, not get uncomfortable, then you're probably not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And it's okay, look, if everybody was a Santa Claus, we wouldn't have people to work in our businesses. So it's not one way or another, but that's sort of a first level test. Now, there are other times when it may be just that the timing is off, where you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. And I talked about this with somebody a little bit earlier today about my own experience and the fact that I was raised in a family where money was a big issue. And in fact, my dad made us into what I call like money hoarders. It's a money sickness, kind of like El Cheapo, where he said if you spent money on anything, you would end up living in a box under Lower Wacker Drive in Chicago. So my sister and I always really hoarded money. If we went out to dinner, I would not order wine because it was $6 for a glass, and I could buy a bottle for the same amount and have 4 glasses of wine at home. And I know that there are a lot of people that get really funny and get really risk-averse around, maybe it's not just the money, but other areas of taking risk. So in my particular case, I didn't go into entrepreneurship until I had socked away enough money to overcome that issue, because I didn't want to have to worry that if I was forced into making an investment, which is required in a business, that I would be so panicked and end up killing what I had put my time into. So you really have to think about the risk and reward and the ability to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's something that, unlike the Santa and the elf thing, a Santa and the elf is pretty cut and dry. But some of the timing issues, some of the risk issues, you may become more comfortable just by planning ahead and doing those things to take the risk out of the equation for you. I also, on that front, want to mention something about the difference between intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. Because another way to get around the issue, particularly the money issue, is by taking your entrepreneurial spirit and putting it to work in somebody else's business. So many of the entrepreneurs that I talk to don't go into entrepreneurship just for the financial rewards. They're going in because they have that great idea, because they have a passion for something. They want to solve a problem. They want to make something better. But for a lot of people, making that financial commitment and being an entrepreneur and starting your own business is so, so difficult. So there's an opportunity to do that within somebody else's business. It doesn't mean you're not taking a risk. You're putting your career on the line, perhaps. You're getting advocates. You may fail. You may risk somebody else's capital for some people. That's uncomfortable. But it gives you an opportunity to go to a business and to partner and say, I have a great idea, and find the champions. And the trade-off there is that sometimes you can start at square 2 or square 3 instead of back at square 1. You may be giving up some of that financial upside, but you still get the opportunity to get the entrepreneurial juices flowing. So I would recommend for some of you, if that becomes an issue, if the risk and reward becomes an issue, that that's something that you take into account, how I can go in and perhaps be entrepreneurial within the confines of somebody else's organization. And as I alluded to, you have to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I always say that one of the things I didn't realize when you become an entrepreneur is that you actually catch being bipolar. I didn't know it was contagious, but apparently it is. You go through these crazy high highs and these amazing low lows, and it is just day after day after day. One day you're up here, you're on top of the world, and then the next day something happens and you are way down here. And depending on the size of your organization, especially if you're a small business, you may not have a lot of other people out there going through that with you. So it can become really, really crazy, and you have to learn to lean into that chaos. And that's been, I know, a transformational process for me. I'm definitely somebody who is chaotic, calm in the chaos, I guess is the best way I could say it, and gets really crazy if there's nothing going on, and I invent things to do at that point in time. And because of the rule of the 3, because everything takes so much longer than you have intended it for to, you end up on this crazy, crazy loop of the roller coaster. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, realize it is going to be like that almost every single day. All right, so before I get into Q&A, I just want to wrap everything up in a bow because, as I said, entrepreneurship is amazing. It is something that can feed you like no other. It's something that if you put your heart and your soul, you can get a lot of things out of it that you're not going to be able to get in other places, but you have to think through if it's right for you. I always say that the most successful businesses happen when you have the right people who are pursuing the right opportunity at the right time with the right preparation. And that means going through the risks and rewards. It means looking at the mindset, making sure you're going into business for the right reasons. And make sure that you have the timing set up, that you've got the experience, that from a responsibility standpoint, it's a good time for you guys to go into business, that you're pursuing the right opportunities, that you have something that fits your goals, that you perhaps are looking at something that's scalable, that's a big business, and that's not just a job that you've created and given yourself the pleasure of having, paid for the pleasure of having. And that also that you're the right person to do it. And if that is not all in alignment for you, then take your time. You know, a good business opportunity, with the exception of maybe some really big technological innovations, a good business opportunity should be around for some time. Otherwise, it ends up being a fad, not a trend. So make sure that you're prepared and that it is the right time for you, and at the risks and rewards all balance it out. Because there are a lot of dirty little secrets about entrepreneurship, but sometimes those dirty little secrets are what makes it worthwhile for you. So with that said, that is the end of the formal presentation, and I will turn it over to some Q&A, and I can talk about what's going on there, anything that I'm doing in the media investment banking, or any other questions that you guys might have.
Yes, we have a couple of runners, so thank you, Parker.
Hello? Okay, good. So I know that you talked a lot about entrepreneurs as individuals, but you didn't really talk about an entrepreneurial team. So I was wondering what you think about maybe being knowledgeable about your own skill set and finding other people that will kind of complement you.
Absolutely. So entrepreneurship, finding a partner or a group of partners is pretty much like finding a mate. And you have to be very, very careful about it because a lot of people go into those partnerships together and they don't always work out as you've planned. So I think the first thing that you should do is A, look for somebody who has complementary skills. I think the default is that we all tend to like people who are a lot like us. And so we end up attracting people who sometimes have the exact same skills, who think the exact same way. However, that's not going to round out your team, and that's not going to help you scale to the next level, which then creates the little bit, either the yin and yang or the conflict, depending on how you do it. So I always advocate going into those partnerships pretty much like you would go into a marriage. You start with a prenup and say, this is who's bringing what to the table, and this is what happens if it doesn't work out. And then you set up really specifically who is doing what on paper. And if you don't have that communicated very well, you're going to find that you end up in a situation where there's misunderstandings, where somebody's going to say, you're in charge of marketing. And you're going to mean marketing and PR, and that person is going to hear marketing and somebody else is doing PR. So the more that you can put down and come up with a really clear structure around, the better off you're going to be. And then it's really important to continue that communication and check in along the way, because a lot of times what happens is somebody's not pulling their weights. You probably know this from group projects from time to time, right? Somebody ends up slacking off, and have sort of measurable goals and milestones. What's working, what's not working. And then if it doesn't work out, make sure that you're parting ways amicably. And that's why you negotiate that prenup up front, because if you end up building anything of value, and I don't care if it's a customer list, I don't care if it's a piece of technology, whatever it is, it's much more difficult to negotiate that once things go south than it is when everybody's best friends up front. So teams can work, and there have been a lot of successful teams, but just as many successful teams, there are a lot that tend to go the other direction. So it can work, just make sure you protect yourself if you're going to do that. And just like a marriage, communication is definitely key.
Who has the next question? Amanda? Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a second-year MBA student, and there's a few of us I see in here that are in the same consulting class that we just got into. And some of us are going to be advising some business startups and some people that are probably really passionate about the opportunity but really definitely haven't created the opportunity, per se, kind of what you said in your presentation. So what advice would you have for us as we're going out and dealing with these people? Maybe they're professionals, but maybe they're not, maybe they don't have that experience. What could you give us to kind of help in, I don't want to say dealing with them, but in helping the idea come to fruition?
Can you give me a more specific question in terms of like what area?
Okay, for example, some of us are trying to help a restaurant startup.
Okay.
And obviously with a restaurant startup, there's a lot of costs associated. They fail pretty readily. How do we prepare them maybe for failure?
Okay, so restaurant startups are a great example of one. I would always look through a lens to say, is there a way that they can do it on a smaller scale first to test it out? So instead of a restaurant, what you may want to give them for advice to say, how about starting a food truck? So instead of paying for rent, instead of doing the whole build out and having this cost you 6 figures, maybe you can find a food truck that you can do on a fraction of the cost to see if it works first, see if anybody likes it, see if you still like it. Because that's one of the biggest issues, is that they end up losing the steam, they lose the passion, and they've just dumped 6 or 7 figures into a restaurant. So maybe that would be one way that you could approach it. Another way to approach it, if you feel like they don't have the experience, is grab their butts and go work in somebody else's restaurant for a week. Get them out of just thinking about the business on a piece of paper, get it into an experience. The other place that I would really focus too is on marketing, because back to my field of dreams, everyone thinks they're going to open up the restaurant and there's going to be a line around the block. And they may not start doing the marketing and the seeding of it until the day they're ready to open the doors. So what can they be doing while they're building up the operations to get the customers? Because it does you no good to have this beautiful, fantastic restaurant with great food and nobody who's coming into it. So those are the kinds of things I would focus on. Is there a way that they can do it on a lower cost? Is there a way they can test it out? And how can they start marketing themselves and building up the awareness and the customer base, get everyone really excited so that day one they have that excitement, that honeymoon period, if you will. Sure.
We have time for one last question, maybe right here.
Hi.
Hi.
I am in a partnership that has been profitable for the last 3 years. So
congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We're considering starting the growing period. And I was wondering if you had any comments about or wisdom about building an advisory board of friends, families, and professionals.
Sure. So don't put your friends and families on unless there's a really good reason to put them on, because they're happy to give you advice. But if your sisters ran a lemonade stand and that's the extent of her entrepreneurial experience, it's not going to really help you. So I would be very strategic about it and say, if we're going to take this business to the next level, where are the holes? Who are the people we would like to meet? Where are the customers that we would like to get? And really seek out people who fit in that mold. And then make sure you build the connection for them. I get people all the time who come up to me who ask me to be on their advisory board, but I don't know them. I don't know, a lot of times they don't tell me what their business does before they ask. And so I have no idea if I'd want to be on their advisory board. And a lot of times they forget to offer something for my time. So make it worth their while. Maybe you put together some stock options for your advisors to make it worth their while, and you build up the relationship, because the other thing, too, is that people don't always turn out the way that you expect. And so if you maybe try them out for a smaller project, like, hey, can we buy your consulting time for like an hour or two? And maybe they offer to give it to you for free because they like, but at least you've offered to pay them, and you've spent a couple $100 on their time. Then you find out if this is somebody who's really going to follow through, because some of these people are so busy that even if they theoretically have the connections, they don't necessarily fulfill it. So that's a much cheaper way to try them out before you stick them on your advisory board, rather than building an advisory board and then being disappointed that the people aren't showing up. So those are some suggestions. Great.
Carol, thank you so much for your
Great.
time
Thank
today.
you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And I guess if there are further questions, I'll be outside afterwards. So
That's
happy
right.
to.
Before everyone leaves, I'd like to recognize Carol and give her a gift of appreciation today. So here you go.
Oh, thank you so much. Fabulous.
And then you and Dale can
Yes.
head up. And I'd also like, 1 second please, I'd also like to thank those who made today possible, especially those including the staff at the University Bookstore, who organized and promoted today's book signing, which will be at the top of the stairs, the staff at the Advancement Office, the Academic Support Center, and Recess Photography, LG Patterson. On that note, we do invite everyone to attend the book signing, which will be, again, at the top of the stairs in the foyer, and join Carol there. If you have further questions, she'll be available for a bit of time there. Thanks again.